The ground moves before the sound reaches you. That is the first thing. A deep, subterranean tremor, traveling up through the soles of your sandals and into your bones. And before your mind can form any question around it, the sky above Mount Vesuvius splits open, not with fire, not yet, with a column of ash and gas and pulverized rock so enormous, so incomprehensibly tall, that it begins to smother the midday sun the way a hand might smother a candle flame. It is the 24th day of August in the year 79, and you are standing in the streets of Pompeii, one of the most prosperous cities in the Roman Empire. And everything you thought you understood about this ordinary summer morning is about to become irrelevant. You do not know that what you are watching will be studied for nearly 2,000 years. You do not know that the ash settling softly on your shoulders will preserve this moment with a cruelty so precise that historians will one day read the outline of your city from beneath 4 to 6 meters of volcanic debris. All you know in this moment is that the air smells wrong, sulfurous and sharp, like something ancient has cracked open deep underground, and its stored breath is rising toward you. And the mountain you have lived beside your entire life, the mountain whose slopes hold flourishing vineyards and country estates, and some of the most productive farmland in the empire, is no longer the mountain you know. If you are watching this channel for the first time, this is what we do at Lost in History. We place you inside the moment's history recorded as the person living it, not observing it. Every episode is built on real documented history. No exaggerations, no inventions. If that earns your attention, subscribe now. If this has already pulled you in, leave a like. Now let us go back to Pompeii. The city you are standing in is not a minor provincial settlement on the edge of the empire. Pompeii, in the year 79, is a thriving Roman port city with an estimated population of somewhere between 11,000 and 20,000 residents, a place of commerce and culture and noise and contradiction. The streets are paved with large flat stones worn smooth by decades of foot traffic and cartwheels, and raised stepping stones at every intersection allow pedestrians to cross without wading through the channels of water that run between the curbs. There are around 150 taverns open before sunrise. The amphitheater seats 20,000 people. The city has its own law courts, its own temples to multiple gods, its own thriving trade in garum, the intensely pungent fermented fish sauce that the Roman world cannot seem to function without. Graffiti covers the walls of every major street, electoral campaign sloggings painted in red, messages of love and insult and boast, as immediate as anything written today. This is a city that believes it is permanent, and on the morning of August 24th, it has no particular reason to think otherwise. For the past several days, the earth beneath the city has been restless. Minor tremors, the kind that rattle ceramic dishes on market stalls and send thin cracks running up plastered walls along the Via dell'Abbondanza, have been coming and going without pattern. But earthquakes are not unusual in this region. The ground near the Bay of Naples has always been active. In the year 62, roughly 17 years before this day, a massive earthquake shook Pompeii so violently that entire sections of the city collapsed. The restoration work is, in 79, still ongoing. Several temples remain under reconstruction. The aqueduct system feeding the network of lead pipes beneath the streets has been losing pressure for weeks in ways the city engineers cannot account for. Volcanologists today recognize that water disruption as one of the clearest possible warning signals of volcanic activity building beneath the mountain, underground pressure literally displacing the water table. But in 79, there is no framework for making that connection. There is no word in Latin for what is happening beneath Vesuvius. What you call it is simply the mountain, and mountains, in everything you have ever known or been taught, do not erupt. Not in living memory, not in any recorded history your civilization possesses. The initial explosion drives a column of gas and rock and pulverized volcanic material upward from the summit at extraordinary velocity. The eruption column rises to an altitude that volcanologists estimate at between 20 and 30 kilometers above the peak, reaching into the lower stratosphere, and at that height it spreads outward in the distinctive shape that Pliny the Younger, watching from across the bay at Misenum, will later describe as resembling a stone pine tree, the tall Italian maritime pine with its long, bare trunk and wide spreading crown. Pliny the Younger is somewhere between 17 and 18 years old on this day, staying with his uncle Pliny the Elder, who commands the Roman naval fleet at Misenum. He will write 2 detailed letters to the historian Tacitus describing what he witnessed, and those letters remain the only surviving eyewitness account of this eruption. They are so systematic and observationally precise that volcanologists still use them to reconstruct the sequence of events. The eruption type itself is named in his honor, a Plinian eruption, a column so tall it reaches the stratosphere, sustained for hours by enormous gas pressure, before it collapses back upon itself with consequences no one on the ground can yet imagine. From where you stand in the streets of Pompeii, the column is visible above every rooftop in the city. It is moving, expanding, alive in a way that no natural formation you have ever encountered is alive. The light is changing, not darkening gradually the way it does before a storm, but shifting in quality, becoming something thicker, belonging to a different kind of sky than the one you woke beneath this morning. And then, sometime around midday, the pumice begins to fall. Pumice is not the fine, soft ash that the word volcanic might suggest to a modern imagination. It is small, irregular chunks of porous volcanic rock, saturated with tiny gas bubbles trapped, as magma cooled at explosive speed during its violent ascent through the vent. Some pieces are the size of a fingernail, some the size of a walnut, some are larger, and they fall with enough force to bruise exposed skin, to fracture bone at an unlucky angle, and to accumulate on every flat surface with a speed that becomes terrifying the moment you begin to understand what you are looking at. Researchers estimate the pumice was accumulating across Pompeii at a rate of 15 to 20 centimeters per hour in the early phase of the eruption. By nightfall, certain rooftops will begin to collapse under the combined weight. A standard Roman tiled roof was simply not designed for that kind of sustained mounting load. You press yourself into a doorway, covering your head with your arms, watching the street around you fracture into chaos. The city is in motion, but not organized motion, not an evacuation with any logic to it. Thousands of people are simultaneously discovering that their world is breaking apart and processing that discovery at vastly different speeds. Some run toward the city gates, moving instinctively away from the mountain. Some run toward the harbor, believing the sea offers the fastest escape. Some run without direction at all, because the human brain, under genuine mortal panic, does not always move toward logic. It moves toward noise, toward other bodies, toward any movement that resembles a decision being made by someone who knows more than you do. A woman passes you with 2 small children, one pressed against each shoulder, both with their faces buried in her neck. An old man stands in the intersection ahead of you, looking upward at the column with an expression you cannot name. A dog chained outside a house on the Via di Nola throws its entire body against the chain in a continuous frenzy, its nails carving marks into the stone where it scrambles. And here is the question this moment demands. And I want you to genuinely sit with it before we go any further, because it has no comfortable answer. When the eruption begins and you do not yet know how severe it will become, do you run immediately and take nothing? Or do you go back for the people and things that matter to you? The archaeology of Pompeii shows both decisions preserved in exactly the positions where each person made them. Skeletons were found near the city gates, close to escape, but not past it. Others were found in the deepest interior rooms of their homes, having chosen shelter over flight. Some were found still holding leather bags of coins and jewelry, having gone back one final time for what they valued most. Every one of those decisions was made by a person who did not know how the story ended. None of them can be judged from this distance, but I want to know what you would do. Tell me in the comments below, honestly, because that question says something real about each person who takes the time to answer it. The pumice falls through the afternoon and into the evening without mercy, and the city transforms beneath it at a pace that is almost incomprehensible. By early nightfall, the accumulation in the streets reaches half a meter in some areas. Moving through the city now requires the kind of effort you would need to wade through something heavy and unstable. The footing is treacherous. The visibility is deteriorating as finer particles mix into the air above the falling pumice, stinging your eyes and scratching your throat with every breath. From the buildings around you comes the sound of rooftop structures beginning to give way, a low, splitting creak that you feel in your chest before you fully process it as sound. People have begun tearing strips from their clothing to wrap around their faces. Some carry large ceramic vessels above their heads as improvised shields against the falling rock. The sky that should be giving way to a normal summer sunset is already so completely obscured by the volcanic cloud overhead that darkness arrives over Pompeii hours before it reaches the surrounding countryside. You are moving through streets you have walked thousands of times, and they no longer feel like streets. They feel like the floor of something that has no name in any language you have spoken. The sounds of the city have been replaced entirely. The ordinary sounds of Pompeii, cartwheels on paving stone, vendor calls, water running between curbs, conversations drifting through open doorways, are gone as completely as if someone extracted them from the air. What remains is the hiss of pumice landing on stone and tile, the continuous low roar from the direction of the mountain, and the crying. Not the sharp, sudden crying of physical pain. The sustained, rhythmic sound of people who have stopped expecting rescue. It comes from inside houses on both sides of every street you pass, from people who chose to shelter indoors, and now find the accumulated debris outside their doors has sealed them in. The sound does not stop. It follows you through every block. Across the bay at Misenum, Pliny the Elder has spent the afternoon receiving increasingly urgent messages from people stranded along the coast. He has already dispatched warships to assist. Now he boards a vessel himself and sails directly toward the column of fire on the horizon, while every other vessel in the water is sailing away from it. He is 60 years old, heavy-set, and his nephew describes him as suffering from a breathing condition. He does not turn around. He will reach the coast near Stabiae south of Pompeii, spend the night there attempting to organize rescues, and die on the beach the following morning. The precise cause is debated: suffocation from volcanic gases, cardiac collapse from the physical strain, or some combination of both. What is not debated is that he knew the risk when he boarded the ship and boarded it anyway. There is something in that fact that deserves its own silence. Through the night, the situation inside Pompeii compounds in ways that multiply and reinforce each other. Rooftops are collapsing with increasing frequency. People who sheltered on upper floors to stay above the rising ground level accumulation now find themselves directly beneath those failing structures. People who retreated to ground-level rooms and cellars find those spaces sealed as debris piles against every opening from outside. The water system stopped functioning hours ago. The air inside sheltered spaces is thick with particulate that makes every breath a decision. Outside, the pumice layer is now deep enough that single-story building doorways are fully buried at their lower sections, and the stepping stones that once let pedestrians cross street channels have vanished entirely beneath the surface. And then, somewhere in the early morning hours of August 25th, the eruption column changes. The Plinian column has been sustained for hours by the energy of the volcanic system pushing material skyward, but columns of this scale are structurally unstable over time. The weight of the lofted material and the cooling of the driving gases eventually overwhelm the upward thrust, and sections of the column begin to collapse back toward the mountain and spread outward at ground level. What this generates is called a pyroclastic surge, a cloud of superheated gas and pulverized volcanic material moving across the landscape at speeds researchers estimate exceeded 100 kilometers per hour. At temperatures volcanologists calculate reached between 200 and 500 degrees Celsius at varying distances from the vent. It does not behave like wind. It flows like a liquid made of heat and poison, following the shape of the land, filling every available space with a completeness that leaves nowhere to go. Sitting directly at the base of Vesuvius is struck first. Most of its population evacuated earlier in the day, but roughly 300 people remained, sheltered in the arched stone boat chambers along the ancient waterfront. They were found in the 1980s, their skeletons grouped in the postures of people who had crowded together and waited in the dark. The surge reached them with a speed and heat so absolute that death was instantaneous. Thermal shock fractured bones. In some skulls, the heat caused immediate vaporization of soft tissue within the cranium. They did not suffer over time. The moment simply ended for them. That fact carries a grief that takes a moment to locate properly inside yourself. The first surge to cross into Pompeii arrives before dawn on August 25th. The city is already partially destroyed, its rooftops collapsed, its streets buried, its population either long gone through the gates or sheltering in whatever spaces remain accessible. The surge does not need to move through the streets. It moves above the accumulated debris, filling doorways and alleyways and interior spaces with a cloud whose toxicity kills before the temperature does. For many still alive inside buildings, death comes through the composition of the gas cloud itself, an atmosphere of superheated carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide and fine particulate that renders a person unconscious within seconds of exposure. There is a breath, and then there is not. The body settles into wherever it was. The plaster cast that archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli developed beginning in 1863 by injecting liquid plaster into the voids left in hardened volcanic matrix where bodies had decomposed over centuries, revealed something that took time to fully absorb. The people of Pompeii, in many cases, did not die in prolonged agony. They died where they were, and their bodies held the exact positions of the final moment of consciousness. A man on his side with one arm folded across his face. A woman whose posture shows she was still holding a child when she died. A gladiator still shackled by the ankle to a post in the barracks near the amphitheater, unable to flee regardless of his strength. A dog still wearing its collar with decorative bronze studs, curled as tightly as its body would allow beneath a low window. These are not artistic representations. They are the exact shapes of the last seconds of real, individual, specific lives. By the time the eruption subsides in the late morning of August 25th, Pompeii has been buried under volcanic material averaging between 4 and 6 meters in depth across the entire city. The bakeries are sealed inside it. The law courts are sealed. The food left on serving counters at the Thermopolia. The jewelry arranged on dressing tables. The graffiti still wet on walls when the pumice began to fall. The roads leading to Pompeii from the surrounding countryside now lead to a flat gray field. The mountain's profile has changed permanently. Survivors who return in the following weeks to search for family or buried property find a landscape that offers nothing back. For roughly 1,700 years, Pompeii is not mourned. It is simply forgotten. Not mythologized, not spoken of as a symbol of lost greatness, erased from the working memory of the civilization that replaced Rome. Then, in the late 1500s, during canal construction, laborers begin to find inscribed stones and painted wall fragments beneath the earth. Systematic excavation begins in 1748, and what emerges from that ash is not ruins in the conventional sense. What emerges is a city caught in mid-sentence. Food still arranged in bowls. Frescoes so vivid in color, they seem painted that morning. And on the walls of the streets, graffiti. Endorsements for candidates whose elections were never held. Declarations of love to people who never read them. The small, ordinary arguments and pleasures of a city that had no idea it was about to become the most studied archaeological site in human history. The excavations continue into the present century. In sections of Pompeii, opened for the first time in recent years, archaeologists have found a bakery with its stone mills in place and carbonized loaves still inside the oven from the morning of August 24th. They have found rooms with mythological frescoes of extraordinary quality, the colors impossibly bright after 2,000 years of sealed darkness. They have found human remains whose analysis reveals origins, diet, and the texture of individual lives in a city that was fully alive until the moment it was not. Each new discovery from Pompeii does not feel like history being recovered from a distance. It feels like a conversation being rejoined with people who were interrupted mid-sentence and are still, somehow, waiting. You were there at the beginning of this video when the tremor traveled through the soles of your sandals. You felt the pumice land on your arms. You heard the dog on the Via di Nola. Now you are here, in whatever present moment belongs to you, perhaps at a desk, perhaps in motion, perhaps in a quiet room with a window showing you a sky that is today exactly what a sky is supposed to be. The distance between those two moments contains the fall of an empire, more than a millennium of forgetting, and then the slow, careful work of remembering. And still, the shape of a woman holding a child in the ash is not remote. It is not symbolic of anything larger than itself. It is just a woman and a child on a morning that became something no one was prepared for, which is the kind of morning that still happens in different forms to people who are no more ready for it than she was. That is why Lost in History exists. Not to observe the past from a safe distance, but to enter it. Because those people were not symbols or lessons or cautionary figures from a chapter in a book. They were people, entirely and completely, carrying the same interior life, the same capacity for love and panic and sudden courage that you carry right now. If this video put you somewhere real today, this channel belongs in your life. Come back for the next one. We will go further in